Hi. So this is the fifth video lecture on the topic of politics. Left off where we left off. Okay, so in the previous lecture video, we were talking, or I was talking about some of the Kansas politics, specifically districts and senators and things like that. And the assignment that followed that one, or you should have hopefully looked at before you logged onto this video, is one that asks you to figure out who your elected officials are, who are your state representatives, and what parties they are. And you should have, hopefully you were able to search that. If you didn't, I hope you'll drop me a message and let me know it didn't work or you didn't understand it. Okay, in this video lecture, I want to talk about some of the sociology of voting, or some of the sociology of not the political process, but political participation. So what you have here, so the question is remember, it's about the race, class, and gender of votes. Who votes more? Young people, old people, white people, people of color? And I guess I'll just answer that question. Well, so let me back up actually. What you have here on the right is, on this side over here, is you have an illustration of it. When you hear folks, or when you hear talking heads, news media, when they talk about voter turnout is not based on the number of people. So you have a breakdown. I actually don't know where this Vandus Heights collection is, but it was a great little illustration of the relationship between like the population and how many votes are actually cast. So your population obviously includes everybody, regardless of age. Then you have your eligible voting population. And I don't know how this one's decided, but certainly you have characteristics like age. You have to be over 18. This may or may not have included formerly incarcerated people, because in some states you lose your right to vote if you have a felony conviction for various reasons, or maybe you don't have citizenship status. There's a host of reasons why you wouldn't even be in the eligible population. Then once you're eligible, you have to register to vote. So then you have your number of registered voters. So you can see by this figure, there's maybe 100 and maybe 1,500 eligible people who are not registered to vote. Again, for a whole, right. So those would be the eligible people. And that's a step you have to take. Some states would like to do an automatic voter registration, which is if you have a driver's license, you're automatically registered. The state of Kansas doesn't have that, but you can register to vote when you get your driver's license or renew your tags, I think, on both cases. And then so the chart again goes back to the registered voters and then the number of ballots. So when they say that it's an 83% voter turnout, it's not 83% of the population, nor is it necessarily 83% of the eligible voters, but it's 83% of the people that registered to vote. So groups that are active and actively engaged in, so I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and our big projects are about getting people who are eligible registered to vote, because in the state of Kansas, again, you cannot participate. Some states have same day registration, which means you can register the day that you cast your ballot, but the state of Kansas does not. It's about 2 weeks in advance that you have to register to vote. And we could discuss the merits of that. I had mixed feelings. Okay, moving right along. So who votes more? Young people or old people? Young people are the least likely to vote. So the older you are, the more likely you are to participate. That's one of the reasons that in towns like Manhattan, we spend a lot of time on college campuses getting those people registered. White or people of color? That would be white people. White people vote more than people of color. Employed or unemployed? Well, this goes way back to the chapter on deviance. Basically, the same trends are we see there. It is people who are integrated, educated, integrated, and not disenfranchised. So that means employed people, educated people, married people, rich people. And actually, this is one of those odd sort of turns. Women actually vote more than men do. So older, white, employed, educated, married, rich, and women. That's the odd one. So remember when we were talking back in the early part of the semester and I was talking about Durkheim and his suicide and his social integration, it's another illustration of that same trend, the more connected. And that's what this slide is about, is that who votes more, or what are some of the theories? And one of the theories is basically socially integrated people, people who are more connected. Maybe they have more, I mean, for a whole variety of reasons. It's quite similar, actually, that the more integrated you are with a group, the more you sort of believe the group, or the more that the group can influence you, right? And so the opposite of that is also true, that people who are alienation, people who feel who are disenfranchised. So what is, let's say, why bother? They're all liars anyway. They don't really care about me. So if I don't feel like I'm part of the system, or the system represents me, I'm obviously not going to care about the system, right? So that also comes from the chapter on deviance, which says that control theory, which says that the more I'm connected, the more I follow the rules. And what was the other one? Alienation and strain theory. And strain theory says I'm not going to follow the rules if the rules don't work for me. So alienation. And then apathy, right? And apathy is simply, it's kind of like learned helplessness in psychology. Like, why bother? It's not going to change anything. The system is broken. I'm not going to participate. One thing that's really not up here, that I don't know where you would put it, maybe in apathy, but there are some faith traditions that don't participate in the political process. And their argument is that the political process is a product of humans, or a product of man, and they want to spend their energy bringing forth the kingdom of God. So I don't know necessarily where you put that, but it's really more about how I direct my attention, and I can kind of get that. Voting patterns reflect life experiences, and basically it says that women's patterns are different, right? Women are more likely to vote for candidates that support issues that are closer to women, and the same thing would be true for people of color, right? People of color are more likely to vote for candidates that they feel like support their issues. So this is why it's important when groups are, or this is why groups work so hard to get their people registered to vote, because if we vote according to our social location, if you get folks from certain social locations registered to vote, they're more likely to participate, right? See how all of that's sort of connected. And it's also why when folks are criticizing voter legislation, or voter protections, they're called, that they sort of push back against those, because the argument is that those rules make it difficult for only certain segments of the population to vote. And so when you make it harder for certain groups to vote, or certain places, certain regions to vote, then obviously folks are not going to vote for candidates like those people. I hope that makes some sense. But one of them that does kind of make me go, huh, was the one about it was illegal to give bottles of water to people standing in line at polling places. And so that would structurally disenfranchise people in the South, where the climate is hotter and they're more likely. Well, and then if you look at how votes in the South, especially like Georgia, I think that was Georgia, right? Were yeah, and then it gets into who votes early, who has to stand in line, all that sort of stuff. Okay, and I can speculate on those patterns, but I don't have any data on them at the moment. Okay, so then there's some other terms here. But what do we mean by special interest groups or lobbyists? So special interest groups are just like they sound. They're people who have a particular interest. And when we talk about mobilization is just a fancy word for getting people to do stuff. So if you sign a petition, if you get out to vote, if you shop at a certain place, if you call your senator, those are examples of being mobilized. So like Sierra Club, or NRA, or Black Lives Matter, or Christians Against Hate, all of those would be considered a special interest group. What's that one called? AARP, right? It's basically just people who share a similar social location, or a similar interest for whatever reason. I mean, even interests around hobbies. Stamp collectors are a special interest group. What a lobbyist is a lobbyist is someone who is paid professionally to, you might think of, wander around the lobby of the State House. So special interest groups, if they are formalized, they can pay someone, they can pay a lobbyist, they can pay someone to go to Topeka and to speak to the senators. So you don't have to, right? So for instance, a group that I was a part of, we are preservationists, and we're a special interest group, and we want old buildings to be preserved and maintained before they're knocked down and replaced with new ones. We have a lobbyist. So people contribute to this organization, and then there is an individual, her first name is Terry, I think her name is Terry Humphrey, and she spends 20 hours a week on the behalf of preservationists, talking to different elected officials, educating them, influencing them. And see, and that's the thing that I think is also important to think about what a lobbyist does. I mean, certainly there are some sleazy ones that just, buy them dinner and give them baseball game tickets. But there's also the lobbyists that do some education, because an elected official can't know everything about everything. And so here a lobbyist can help them understand. And of course, they're going to help them understand it from the perspective of their issue. But that's what a lobbyist does. So they're persuasive speakers, basically. What a political action committee does is it's a special interest group, but these are like formalized, right? They're formalized and specifically where a special interest group might be like active year round and might be interested in, bringing in new members and writing newsletters. What a political action committee specifically is about is a way of coalescing money, coalescing resources, and giving it to candidates. Or giving it to candidates, or they might invest their money in signage. So I can think of one in Manhattan that I was a part of. Actually, it's what I wrote my dissertation on, was a political action committee called Citizens for a Better Manhattan. We were a small local community organization. A bunch of people put our money in. We tried to help different candidates get elected. In one case, like I remember we were, I think Salina has this law too, public ban on cigarette smoking, right? The Tobacco Political Action Committee, which has millions of dollars, right? We were advocating for, we wanted this public smoking ban, and the tobacco companies who had millions of dollars wanted it to fail. They didn't want a public smoking ban. So they bought a lot of signage, right? They had a lot of money and they could invest in supporting candidates. And so that was an example of, I hope that makes some sense, but that was an example of how two interest groups, but they weren't interest groups, they were political action committees, because really all we were about was spending money to win an election, right? And they had opposing sides. Ours was very small, theirs was very big. But all of these kind of boil down to money, because what special interest groups do is they try to educate, and usually they'll have like two bank accounts. They'll have like one bank account that is for education. I used to know all these numbers, I don't remember what they are, but one is for like education, and so that would be how they'd write their newsletters. And then they have another bank account where they can give those to candidates. Like a political action committee will only have one, and you have to, there's laws about how you support candidates, and like you have to report if you're over $500 and all of these rules. So there's a lot of legal rules. And I'm going to stop right there because you're probably not terribly interested in all of the details around the politics of political influence.